Hello, and thank you for tuning into this conversation on leading through crisis, where we engage leaders from around the world to discuss how to lead in these uncertain times. Today, I'm joined by Jim Johanik. Jim is the Executive Director for Crew LeaderImpact. Uh, he is a 17-year veteran of the capital markets industry, having held senior executive roles in technology and business development with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange as well as the London Futures Exchange. Um, he moved from that into working with LeaderImpact the last number of years. So, Jim, welcome to our to this conversation today.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for having me.
Well, one of the things, in fact, it was about a month ago when we were meeting in Chicago, and we didn't know we were going to have this conversation today, but we talked about 9/11. As we chatted recently, you had a very interesting take in that because of your role in the capital markets at that point. But tell us a bit of your story, and what did that look like? And then I've got some other questions that might relate to that afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody in the world fully understood how their day would transpire that particular day in September 11th in 2001. But I was like any other day coming off of the train in Chicago, walking across the Chicago River towards our office, and I got a call from our New York office, and they said that a plane had entered or crashed into the World Trade Center. As I made my way to the office, I went upstairs, turned the TV on, and I quickly realized that this is something that nobody had envisioned to take place that day. You know, as it relates to the question about leading through crisis, you have a moment, you're faced in that situation of what to do. And we were at that moment gripped with the understanding that the New York Stock Exchange was going to shut down. And we were an all electronic exchange at that moment, even in 2001, and we were facing the reality of a lot of traffic making its way over into our exchange. And so immediately in the midst of people dying, you have to do your job. And our job was to understand whether our technology departments, our infrastructure and everything, even the communication with the US market, whether we'd be able to handle that traffic. I remember when our job was done, we were able then to take care of ourselves. A lot of us got on trains to head back home and to kind of do what we're doing right now in the midst of this crisis, working remotely and taking care of our families while at the same time taking care of the business that we represent.
So, Jim, what did you learn from that day in terms of leadership, and what have you learned since about leadership in the midst of crisis?
You know, since that day, there have been a couple of things that have come to the surface that I learned back then and have carried forth since then. I'm a small plane pilot, and I had a phenomenal trainer. He was a two-tour Afghanistan pilot of the Air Force. And he shared with me that, you know, what we're doing right now is actually preparing for the day that you're going to have to use these skills. I mean, when you're flying level and everything's fine, you're not exactly employing a lot of your leadership, a lot of your skills. But when everything goes wrong, that's when you want to draw upon the skills in which you have. He says you never rise to an occasion. You always fall back to your training. And I thought about that, and I reflected upon that day back in 9/11, and I'm even reflecting upon that right now. That what we're doing with our leadership is really what we've done for the last 10 years in the development of our leadership. And that foundation is what we're going to carry forward into the crisis. And that's how we lead people, is not rising and thinking that we're going to rise to the occasion. It's mainly falling back to what we've done and what we've practiced over time.
Well, a couple other questions for you, Jim, is what are the things that frame your leadership in crisis, and what are the things that help you keep perspective when the world around you seems to be falling apart?
One thing that puts everything in perspective, I'm a big picture guy, like a lot of leaders are. And when you take a step back and you look at a situation like we're in right now, you ask yourself, what are the things that are stable? What are rock solid in my life that I can bank assuredness on? And, for me, my faith in Christ is absolutely a bedrock assurance that I have, even in this very rapidly changing, evolving environment that we find ourselves in. You know, when you can bank on and rest on the stability and the steadfastness that my faith in Christ offers, it gives me the ability then to project that to others. The other thing is, and very briefly, nothing changes in the way that in fact, the whole situation just becomes a magnification of what we were called to do before the crisis, to show that life will go on, that we're going to continue on doing what we've done. We may have to pivot and change and adapt. It's okay. But as leaders, we're just pointing them in the direction of doing what they did before, maybe a little bit differently, but to keep going.
So Jim, at LeaderImpact, our value proposition statement is we want to help leaders grow professionally, personally, and spiritually for increasing impact. Give me a practical example. How does that faith part or that spiritual part, make a difference in the situation that you're in or in the middle of a crisis?
Yeah, that's great. Just the other day in one of our leadership groups, which was performed over a meeting very much like we're having right here, a leader talked about how their family situation is just in a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. My challenge to that leader and others that were part of this call in this group that we formed a very tight bond with was to come alongside and encourage this particular leader to lead well inside their own family, to exude that same level of confidence, assuredness, and steadfastness, much like they would in the marketplace, only to their own family that's gripped with fear and uncertainty at this point. If that doesn't describe good leadership, I don't know what does. I mean, this is really an opportunity for all of us leaders, and especially leaders who take very seriously their faith, to be a source of strength with people, for people in this unchanging, shifting environment.
Well, Jim, thank you for your time. Thank you for your sharing some of your wealth of insight and expertise, particularly as it comes to leading through a crisis. And thank you for joining us today. If you're not already following us on Instagram or Facebook, do that. We're going to do a series of these over the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure you're not going to want to miss out on any one of them. Have a good day. Thank you.